All right, dudes, let's talk some ELK rifles. There's a lot of bullshit on this topic. I'm gonna show you guys 3 different setups. These 3 different setups are very different in terms of the style, the calibers, and the price tag. We're gonna look at one setup that all in is under 1,500 bucks. We're gonna look at one setup that all in is over 10 grand. All of these setups have killed a bunch of elk. On the low end, the newer rifle I'm going to show you, I think I've killed 11 elk with it. I shouldn't say I've killed 11 elk, but either myself or clients that I'm guiding have killed 11 elk with it. On the old historical gun that I've used the most and used as a client gun a ton, over 15 years of guiding with it, I believe that gun has killed probably close to 80 elk. So these systems are proven, but like I said, they're all different. So it'll be very interesting for you, and it should give you a good perspective on what to think about, even if you don't buy one of these rifles. I honestly could care less if you buy any of these exact models or rifles, but going through each setup is going to give you an idea of the pros and cons of each setup, you know, what matters, what doesn't potentially for your style of hunting, and then what matters for your budget too. I mean, that's a giant range, right? We're talking like 3, 4, 5-fold price range. So let's get inside where it's warm and let's dive into these things.
Guys, no excuses. All the stuff that I talk about on the podcast, all the stuff I talk about on YouTube, you can do it, and you can do it with me. There's a bunch of hunting, fishing, spearfishing experiences on my website. Go to pursuitwithcliff.com. Right on the top on the menu, click experiences. It'll walk you through all the different options. These are trips oriented around making you better. It's about the skill set, and it's about improving as an outdoorsman. So if that's you, that's what you want, go check them out and join me on the next one.
All right, the good old Ruger American Predator Edition. All right, so we're starting down at the $1,500 end. This is a 308, and I'm not gonna make this video about caliber, but I'll touch on it real quick for you. So when it comes to caliber on elk hunting rifles, the number one thing that hunters should think about, and I'm talking about 95+% of elk hunters, you should be thinking about recoil mitigation in your mountain hunting rifle. We're gonna be talking about lighter rifles, and these lighter rifles, you just have more recoil because there's not as much weight to control that. The other part of it is an accuracy thing. So the primary issue intermediate mountain hunters run into, intermediate rifle elk hunters run into, that's they develop a flinch and they become afraid of their gun. So you can go out there, you can read a bunch about rifle marksmanship, and you're gonna run into this topic of closed loop, open loop. Joel Turner kind of popularized this mindset in the marksmanship world. I can tell you that from a practical standpoint, the majority of people who have normal everyday lives, it's hard for them to get to ranges to shoot. They can only shoot 3 or 4 times a year. They are never going to achieve, in the rifle hunting sense, the ability to shoot in a closed loop. So what that means is that your body is going to always anticipate the explosion when the round goes. It's going to anticipate that recoil. So the best thing you can do for your long-term accuracy when it comes to this practical type of elk hunting, deer hunting, mountain hunting, whatever, light rifle hunting, say sub 11 pound, sub 12 pound hunting, 12 pound rifle hunting, the number one thing you can do is mitigate recoil. Keep the recoil as limited as possible. I have found that the common elk hunting calibers, the 7 mag, the 308, even the 270 if you're a small guy, a female, that's not a bad caliber. You can still get it done. All of those calibers are fine. They work great. You know, one of the rifles I'm going to show you is a 7 PRC. There's a lot of recoil mitigation on it, so it also falls into that. The recoil on that gun is really, because the gun is so built around mitigating it, the recoil of that gun is about the same as this 308. But regardless, that's what you're looking for. When you get above that in terms of calibers and you get real light guns, you get too much recoil for the vast majority of hunters. And I hate to say it, but unless your rifle is particularly set up for getting that recoil down and it's a little bit heavier rifle, maybe 11, 12 pounds, The 300 Win Mag, to me, is a really touchy caliber. It's way too big a caliber for me personally, 170-pound guy. And I have found that the majority of my clients that shoot the 300 Win Mag, unless they're on top of that rifle and how it's set up, it's too large of a caliber. It's got too much recoil. They tend to not be as accurate as a lot of other shooters because they go down that path with that caliber. You can find 308 everywhere. You can find reloading components for 308 everywhere. So you've got the availability there on the ammo. The cost is fairly low relative to other calibers, so that's all good. Is it ballistically superior to the newer calibers? No, right? But again, we got to go back to the practical part of this. Most folks should not be shooting over 400, 500 yards on elk or deer or whatever in the mountain environments. Given the winds and all the other variables, if you really get into the nitty-gritty of it and your whole life isn't dedicated to, to angled shooting, to shooting across canyons and winds, those sort of things, if you really look at it from a practical standpoint, you should probably be shooting sub 450 yards, sub 400 yards. This caliber, 308, the ballistics, the wind capabilities, all of that are fine. I said I wasn't going to talk about calibers, but there's my tilt on it. All right, so specs on this gun, and this is going to be the biggest pro, right? So with the muzzle brake right there, I don't have a can on this right now. I'll get into that at the end of the video. But just set up like this with the muzzle brake I've got on there, this is a 40-inch rifle. This is substantially shorter than the other two rifles that I'm going to show you. So a couple things there. One, regardless of the caliber, for the most part, the shorter the barrel, you're giving up some velocity. Now, it's going to depend. Again, I don't want to dive deep into calibers. There's a sweet spot, right? There's a point on calibers where it doesn't really make sense to add much barrel length because you're not picking up that much velocity. For 308s, it is a little bit shorter, and that's why you're going to see shorter barrels on 308s more often. Now, regardless of that, we have to get back to the concept I just talked about, and that's that if you're giving up 100 feet per second, 200 feet per second with a shorter barrel, you can factor that in to how far you're shooting. You just got to make sure you know the ballistics. You have your ballistics adjusted for that. That's why you need a chronograph guns. Don't go off the speed that's on the factory ammo because that's going to vary based on the barrel length that they shot the ammo through. Of course, you've got to factor that all in, but you are giving up some distance because if you have lower muzzle velocity out of a shorter barrel rifle like this rifle, you're going to end up having lower velocities out at ranges that you're hitting animals. That's pretty obvious. Now, it's relevant because the terminal ballistics, how the bullet reacts when it hits the animal, when it does the damage, is going to vary on the velocity it hits the animal at. And a lot of bullets, it just depends, what you're talking about. A lot of bullets, it's around that 2,000 feet per second, right? So if you get down below 2,000 feet per second, that bullet's probably not acting like it should be, right? Certain bullets, that's going to fall down, to 1,800 feet per second. It's not going to terminally perform like it should. Now, that's relevant if you've got lower muzzle velocity because it's going to shorten the yardage out there where that is, right? So maybe that benchmark that you have to have, if you're shooting a 22-inch barrel, that might be out at 525 yards. If you're shooting an 18-inch barrel, it might be out at 450. So you are going to shorten your capabilities by shooting a shorter barrel. That falls back into what I just mentioned in the sense that who cares, right? For most people, you shouldn't be shooting really into that, edge area anyhow, right? So it's something that we should think about, but just consider that for practical reasons, it really is not that relevant when we're talking about our rifle setups. Now, the massive pro of a rifle like this rifle right here, compared to some of these other rifles that I'm going to show you, is so much nicer to carry. Look at this thing. It is, if I compare this to my Tikka with a can on it, so that's like the other extreme. It's the longest barrel gun that I'm going to show you, plus I'm throwing the can on there, so it's not a real fair comparison. But if I compare that and we look at them, you're gonna see that there's like 10 inches of difference, right? 10 inches hanging up above your head, 10 inches to catch brush, just 10 inches to be a big pain in the ass. It is relevant, and anybody who tells you otherwise has not done much hunting in the mountains.
Guys, biltong, okay? I have been obsessed with this stuff for 3 or 4 years. Ever since I got on a keto, carnivore, paleo-esque type of diet, I've had a hard time finding healthy snacks. Biltong is a great option, particularly the slabs that have this fat on the side. That's where your energy is if you're a fat burner like me. Super simple ingredients in this, guys. Literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. Compare that to your gas station jerky, a great snack in the backcountry or just day to day. Biltong Depot is a huge supporter of my content. Go to their website, biltongdepot.com. Use my discount code CLIFFG, CLIFFG for 15% off at checkout and to support this content. Thanks, guys.
For sure. Just in different terrain, short barrels are awesome. I have moved to shorter and shorter barrels. Now, the flip side of that, and why it's become even more important on these guns, is we're all starting to shoot cans on our guns, right? We're all putting suppressors on our guns. So that's adding, compared to the standard muzzle brake here, that's adding another 4 inches, another 5 inches, depending on the suppressor. So we're already gonna add some length to our barrel there. Now, man, I don't know if I'm ever gonna get to talk about this rifle, but I'm covering all these topics, and I guess they're good stuff for you to know. But it's good to know that when you add length onto a barrel with a suppressor, you don't necessarily get the same velocity back that you would if that was just the length of the barrel, if that makes sense. So you do get some velocity back with a can typically. You might get 10 feet per second, 20 feet per second due to the additional length, but you're not going to get the same velocity increase if you had that barrel that was 4 inches longer, that rifle barrel that was 6 inches longer, right? So just keep that in mind. That's the pros and cons. If you're setting up a new rifle now, even if you can't afford a suppressor right now, you don't want to go through the process of getting a suppressor right now, and honestly, it's not a big deal at all. I've got, I don't know how many, a bunch of them. It is expensive due to just like the bullshit regulation, but you should set your rifle up to have a suppressor. So part of that is you've got to have threading, right? And I'm going to get into that because all these guns have brakes on them anyways, and that gets into recoil mitigation. But you got to have threading. I'll talk about that in a little bit. I'll talk about suppressors a little bit after I get through the rifles because I think it's an important topic. Let's just get into the components here because, Jesus, I could talk about other shit all day. So, starting at the top, this has got an AR Stoner muzzle brake on it. This is a timed brake, meaning you can see it's got holes on it that are on the top. It's got holes on the side. It has to have an actual orientation, right, of the muzzle brake. So it has to be timed, which means that you can't just throw it on the threading and tighten it up, as tight as you can get it, because what's going to happen is these holes will be off to the side, they could be on the bottom, and that's going to affect how the gas comes out of the muzzle brake, how it's set up. So you have to use crush washers, or you have to look at other means to time the brake. So there's a little cost and hassle in there. Now, that muzzle brake right there, you're going to ask, why did you put a 308 like AR-10 style muzzle brake on this rifle? I put it on this rifle because it's cheap. That muzzle brake is $50, right? And this rifle is all about practicality. This whole setup is less than $1,500. Keep that in mind. So we got this AR Stoner brake in the front. It works fine. It mitigates recoil a bunch, and it's loud as fuck. That's just a muzzle brake, okay? That is really the only recoil mitigation you're gonna see on this rifle. Now, when I put a can on this rifle, I actually don't get as much recoil mitigation. I shot this rifle with the Thunder Beast Ultra 7 yesterday with it, and I was really paying attention between it and the brake. And I can tell you that that suppressor does less recoil mitigation, just a little bit. It's more than comfortable for me, 308, no problem. But it's less than this Stoner brake. But these short-barreled rifles, particularly in the practical hunting sense, a big con is you get a lot of muzzle flip. And a lot of times, even if you're shooting at animals that are out there a little bit, 300, 350 yards, 400 yards, in a lot of those scenarios, you can actually call your own shots if you get that recoil mitigation down. I think that outside of just making it so you don't develop a flinch, I think that's also an added bonus, right, of getting that recoil down, is you can call your own shots in the mountain hunting situation. That's awesome, but it's hard to do that on these short-barreled rifles because you're getting a lot of muzzle flip, right, even if you get the recoil down. And so just like the physics, right, your sight picture is gone, so now you got to retrack down the animal. Now, you're probably thinking like, Cliff, you're convoluting all these things, right? You want me to get a short barrel gun for the convenience of it. Don't worry about the velocity, but do worry about the velocity and worry about the distance. And then also put a muzzle brake on there. And then also that short barrel is going to give me more muzzle flip, but I want less muzzle flip. So yeah, guys, it's all pros and cons. You got to figure out what works for you. I'm just laying it out for you so you understand. Now, when you add a can, a suppressor, a silencer, whatever the hell you want to call it, on the front of one of these short barrel rifles, a lot of that muzzle flip goes away because you've got a little more weight up there, and then you've got a little more length too, so you've got a little more weight that's out further, so it's a little bit like of a lever, right? Kind of a lever, kind of holding down that muzzle a little bit, and it actually makes quite a bit of difference. I want to give you guys the breakdown of the cost. So you got $50 in the cheap muzzle brake. You got a crush washer in there, maybe a couple because you're gonna fuck them up. So now you got $10 there. We come down here. I'm not gonna add in the bipod because that's separate. I'm not gonna add in the sling. This is actually a safari sling, one that I'm testing. Let's keep that out of the cost. We've got the rifle. So the Ruger American Predator, that's what this is. Already threaded barrel on it. This is the first generation. It's got removable magazines here. It's got a clunky, shitty action. I have heard that generation 2 of this rifle is substantially better. I have not had the chance to test that out, so I can't comment. My guess is that it is better because I don't know how it could be worse than this rifle. Just the feel of it. I'm not talking about the use, right? So I guess that's, I don't want to deter you from buying this rifle or spending, only this level on a rifle because it works fine. In the moment, yeah, you're going to be able to crank rounds through that thing. You're going to kill an elk. You're going to kill a mule deer. So quit bitching, right, Cliff? Well, I'm just telling you one of the things you're going to notice with a cheaper rifle, right? And let me get to that. So this is $650. So you got $650 in the rifle, and then you've already got the rifle threaded for a brake or suppressor. You've already got the pick rail on the top of the rifle. So you kind of got the whole little package there for $650. That is dirt cheap for a gun nowadays. I mean, what can you buy for $650? So you've got that. Now, let's talk about the optic that I have on here. A Leupold VX3i, discontinued, but the VX3 HD is essentially the same scope. This is a great scope. Back to my original thought on this, guys, like when we're killing elk from 150 to 450 yards, and that's the sweet spot. I mean, that is where elk get killed. People who tell you otherwise are full of shit. That's where elk get killed 90% of the time, okay? In that realm, this scope right here, this optic is fine. This optic is gonna run you, I think, around $500 to $600 from Leupold. They make good stuff. I'll tell you what, this right here, that turret right there with this type of zero stop, what that little click right there does, see that little click right there? Let me pull this up here because I got to show you this. Okay, see that button right there? I dial in elevation. Hear the clicks, right? See how that button right there is now in, okay? That tells me I'm not at zero. I've got clicks in the elevation turret. Boom, back to zero. Stops the turret when I go that way and pops this out. So I got the feel, I got this for visual inspection. I know 100% that I have my gun back at zero. That's huge. Again, back to the practical aspects of hunting in the mountains. In the last 3 or 4 years, I can tell you of at least 6 times I have had clients fuck up shots because they had dialed in for another shot earlier in the day and they left it in their turret. So they thought they were shooting at zero, because this is what happens, right? We go and we're setting up for a 400-yard shot, right, across a canyon. We've got all the time in the world. You know, we're watching this bull. Bull disappears, goes to bed. We never see him again, right? We walk off, right? Hunter forgets to dial back to the zero. I've also had guys think they're at zero, but they're actually a whole turret round in. So again, you want that visual ability to see that you're back at zero. I think that's huge. You know, I don't have it on all my scopes, but it's a plus of this scope. So you've got $600 in there, and then don't go cheap on rings, even on your cheap rifle setup. Your rings should be 100 to 150 bucks. These are Mark IV rings. These are great rings. This right here, you probably saw the Vortex logo. All that is there is that is a level that I put on there from Vortex. I think those are like 30 or 40 bucks. I like to have them just so I know how much my gun is canted. Again, that comes back to your shot setups and how far you're really going to be shooting. Does that actually matter? You know, you look at the math, look at what it really does when you're shooting, and it does to some extent when you get into that 400, 500, 600 yard range, right? It is nice to have a level on there, know where your reticle's at, but it's up to you, right? It's pretty cheap to throw it on there. Looks pretty badass also. Another way you can do that, and I'm friends with Ward, I think it's a cool invention that he has. You can put an angle cosine indicator on there. All of those, or a lot of them, have a good high quality level on them, so you get that component. And then you also get your angle, right? So if you're shooting at angles a lot and you want just an old school method of figuring out the angle so you can shoot properly at the right yardage, the cosine indicator is a pretty cool product too. So you can put that on there instead of this level if you want. But anyways, guys, this whole setup right here is coming in at $1,430. Throw in a bipod, throw in a sling, depending on where you're going on things. Maybe you've got another $100, maybe you've got another $500 because you can go pretty hog wild. If you throw in a suppressor, you're gonna end up, for good ones, another $1,000 or whatever. So those are like big variables. But this right here for $1,450, I said, this is a great rifle. You can kill a lot of elk with this, even without a bipod. You can shoot on your pack. You can learn how to shoot on your trekking poles with the little Wiser precision adapter that I use. That's perfectly fine. I've killed dozens of elk myself and with clients just with that setup. Right here, $1,450. That's the Ruger American Predator. Oh yeah, see this right here? I want to show you guys this. Okay, so this is a function of a stock that doesn't really fit me, right? And the thing is everybody's advice out there is going to be, go out there and get a rifle that has the exact length of pull for you. So when you put it to your cheek, you know, you're going to open up your eye, your sight picture is going to be perfect, you know, your eye relief's going to be perfect, you can adjust your scope a little bit, all of that is natural. This is going to be, you know, perfect length of pull. That is great advice. If you are just a magic human being and you fall right into that mean or mode person in terms of like length of pull here, you're going to have a little trouble getting that exact spot, right? You're not going to have perfect fitting rifles. That can be fixed by this right here. Hope you can see that. That is a little daub of shoe goo. Shoe goo, just epoxy, right? That is like, think of it this way. That is like the anchor point on my cheek, right? When I'm shooting my bow. I come to that every time, and I know if I find that with my cheek, I'm gonna open up and my eye relief and everything is gonna be perfect. I'm not gonna scope myself. That's the spot. Does it help the actual fit of the rifle? No, the rifle doesn't fit me. But we're talking about cheap rifle setups. Do that right there and you're gonna get there. If you guys are wondering, this is just my ballistics on there of the last round I worked up. So that's a Ruger American. That's the cheap option. Let's get into the mid-tier one. Pull out the good old Tikka.
Guys, I've been using onX Maps for almost 2 decades now, hunting, guiding, outfitting. It is the gold standard tool when it comes to mapping software in the hunting world. They have been a huge supporter of my content for multiple years. So if you want to support me and you want to support them, use my code CliffG for 20% off at onxmaps.com. It is an awesome tool that I use all the time when I'm preparing for hunts, and I use it almost every single day in the field. For navigation, knowing unit boundaries, knowing private land boundaries, it is the tool you have to have.
Can you guys see me back there? Maybe it's focusing on me, maybe not. Forgot to tell you, the Ruger American, you're looking at 40 inches with the brake. You throw in a reasonably sized suppressor on there, can on there, you're looking at like 45 inches, you know, because there's a little bit of, additional length relative to your brake, and you're looking at a total weight of 8.4 pounds. So just so you guys know, that might sound heavy to you, right? You're like, oh, Cliff's talking about mountain rifles. I've got a rifle that's 6.5 pounds. I got a rifle that's 7.5 pounds. When you add on all the shit, right? The optic, anything else you put on there, you're generally going to end up, even with lightweight rifles, between 8 and 9 pounds. And to be honest with you, I have found that that's light. Really, if you want accuracy, you want recoil mitigation, and you're practical about it, your rifle's going to end up being probably close to 10 pounds, between 9 and 10 pounds. That's the sweet spot for these type of calibers. 308, 7 mag, 7 PRC, 300 Win Mag, if you want to ignore my recommendation, whatever. In there, 9 to 10 pounds is kind of your sweet spot, right? Tikka, stainless steel, T3. Out of the box, I think this is a sub 7 pound rifle. But after I've heavily modified it, it's more of like a 10 pound rifle. I think it's actually right at 10 pounds, but we'll get into that a little bit here. This rifle has been with me for, I think, about 12 years in different states, different states of changes. And what I'd say is, out of the box, this rifle was phenomenal accuracy, sub MOA, no problem. Now, you can find them for $700 to $900, let's say, stock. The thing about these, the stainless steel version, is they're not going to have a threaded barrel, and there's a couple small modifications that I think they're going to need, right? So you're going to have a little more cost there. You can get the Rough Tech model, and it has a threaded barrel. They've got some other models that have a threaded barrel too, but I don't believe any of the stainless steel models that Tikka makes come with a threaded barrel. So consider that, when we get into, some of these changes that we've made on this rifle. I have found Tikkas to be at this price point, that sub $1,000 price point, let's say around $1,000 price point for the stock rifle. They are some of the most accurate rifles. But depending on the gun, they're all individuals in terms of how finicky they are with ammo. So this particular one is pretty damn finicky with ammo. Like grouping, 3/4 MOA, change ammo, and not necessarily even the weight of the bullet or anything like that. Not drastic changes by, any variable. And you can go to 2 MOA. So pretty drastic changes. I found that some of that did go away, some of that finickiness did go away when I changed to a custom stock. And part of that is that, yes, Tikka barrels are free floating, but the stock, the stock that it comes with, they do have a contact point up here, right around in here when you actually take the stock off. And you'll see that. You can even shave them off. I've heard people doing that. The other negative I'll tell you about these rifles, before I get into all the pros, right? I'm not trying to shit on this, because I believe this, for like budget-oriented guys, like mid-tier guys that want something better than their Ruger, this is the rifle that I recommend. So just so you know, I'm very pro on this gun. But I just want to, give you all the cons, because it's important for your decision-making process. The other con with this rifle is you will see heated barrel issues with it, 100%, right? And again, it's just related to the barrel. If you shoot 3 or 4 rounds in these large calibers. This is a 7 mag, but it's going to be the same in all the calibers I've discussed. 3 or 4 rounds, 5 rounds in relatively short order. The 6th or 7th round is going to be a flinger, like a foot off, right? And so that's just a function from what I've seen with this gun. It's obviously part of just the barrel, right? Thin barrel, stainless steel barrel, gets hot really fast. That lays into the whole accuracy thing. When you're shooting this gun, and if you're reloading and you're choosing the factory ammo it really likes, consider how hot the barrel gets and how fast the barrel gets hot, or you're gonna be like, what the fuck is the deal with these Tikkas? Everybody says Tikkas are awesome, but I'm sitting here in the Arizona sun, sweating my balls off, and I can't get this thing to group at all. It might be related to the heat component. So make sure you've got a lot of time between shots when you're grouping, figuring that whole setup. Now, another thing to consider with the barrel. When you get into having your barrel threaded, there's a lot of competent guys that can thread these barrels, and I already loosened this. I can't take it off. I can't take it off. Sorry guys, I can't take this off and show you because freaking Google will like ban the video. So we can't go there. But if I take this off, I could show you the threading on the small barrel. You want to talk to the smith, whoever does this, and you want to have some foresight, right? The most typical threading that you're gonna see on rifles for brakes and for suppressors is, I believe, 5/8 by 24. You got like a diameter measurement, 5/8, and then 24 is going to be the thread count, right? There's a smaller one that's kind of a substandard. It's 1/2 inch by, I want to say 28, but whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about. You want to talk to the smith about that, because some suppressor companies and some of the good ones, like Thunder Beast, the way they manufacture their suppressors, they will not put a 30 caliber suppressor onto a 1/2 inch by 28 threading, if that's the type of threading. Now, the reason that's relevant is because like this rifle, and I believe it's because of the size of the barrel, it is threaded with like that secondary option, right? So it's the 5/8, the 1/2 inch, right, is how the barrel is threaded. So I love this Gunwerks suppressor. This is a titanium suppressor they sell. It's awesome, it's badass, but if I wanted some flexibility to use like Thunder Beast suppressors, I couldn't, because the threading is not that bigger setup where I could put those on. So just something to consider if you can get the standard, but I don't even know that it's possible in these barrels. So just something to think about. All right, man, I just freaking talk, but I guess this shit's useful to you. Recoil mitigation, let's talk about it. So there's gonna be some things here that people bitch about a little bit, okay? So a couple things on recoil mitigation. This rifle out of the box with a light scope, nothing modified, is too light in elk killing calibers. It just is. I hate to say it, and that's going to make some people upset, but you're going to develop a flinch. It's going to be a bitch to shoot. It's just going to suck. So you're not going to be very good with it. Guys, if you want to show me a guy that I could guess, again, generalization, guys, but if a guy shows up and I'm going to pack him into a wilderness elk hunting camp and he's got a Tikka T3, no brake, no suppressor, small scope, no recoil pad, and it's a 300 Win Mag, you're talking about a 7-pound rifle, maybe a 7.5-pound rifle with his optic on there, that guy is going to suck. He's going to be very inaccurate because that gun has been beating the shit out of him. And if he's a normal guy, the only recent time that he shot that rifle is probably 3 or 4 days before he came to elk hunt. So it's fresh in his mind that that gun is painful and not fun to shoot. That is kind of the recipe for inaccuracy. Now, this is a 7 mag. If it was a 300 Win Mag, you could do these same things to get it a little bit under control. Now first, the stock. This is a Bell & Carlson stock. This is a $350 stock or thereabouts. So it's an expensive modification. Now, this stock is a little bit heavier than the stock from Tikka. So you've got that component, and then it's got a nicer recoil pad on it, right? A thicker recoil pad on it. So you've got a little bit of recoil mitigation there with the extra weight, the recoil pad. The other thing about this stock is it allows me to put on this right here. So this is a front sling mount, but it's got a pick rail on it. Let me show you guys here. Underneath that bipod is a pick rail chunk on the forearm. I didn't mention this on the Ruger, but I have it on the Ruger too. So, and that was factored in on the price, right? It's already in there. I probably have it written down here. What do those cost you? $35. $35 for this. Depending on, you know, the rifle, you might have to pay a gunsmith to help you out. On this particular setup, I did it myself. I'd say it's like low-level gunsmithing. Most guys could figure it out. You can put that rail in there. The reason these rails sometimes take a little bit of gunsmithing is they have two holes in them, right? Because if you only have one where your old, you know, kind of standard stock sling swivel comes out, you've only got that one spot. This rail is going to have a tendency with torque and everything else to want to pivot around that. So there's two holes there. You might have to do a little gunsmithing because of that. Now, the reason I brought that up, or the reason that triggered that in my mind, is that this stock was set up and had the setup within the internal part of the stock to have two holes from my pick rail. The reason I have this pick rail right here is all my bipods go on there. It's a lot easier, a lot sturdier rail to have. And the other thing is I can stick a light on here. So my pistol light or whatever, I can put that light on there if I'm tracking, need another light, want to have a rifle with me when I'm tracking a wounded animal. So that's a little modification I have with the stock, $350 here. The other thing about the stock is it looks cool, and it has no contact with the barrel. So those are all things in the stock. Other little small things here, I put a metal bolt shroud on this Tikka. The one it comes with is a plastic little shitty one. They do tend to break, but in general they just are crappy. And then this has a modified trigger guard from High Desert Rifle Works. Come on, let me show you. This thing's so freaking cool. I gotta show it to you here. Look. Right there. It's got my family's brand on it, which I think is pretty cool. Those are gonna run you like $160. I have heard from several people that they get an uptick in accuracy in groups by going to an aluminum metal trigger guard. I haven't noticed a difference personally, but this gun was pretty accurate out of the box. So is what it is. I think that there might be a chance of that aluminum trigger guard in there instead of the plastic one. It allows somebody who's not always keeping their action screws torqued. It allows them a little flexibility because those action screws stay at the same tension more consistently. So that's just a guess, a speculation of why you might get an accuracy pickup. Other than that, it just adds like a little better quality feel. And then of course, if you want like your initials or brand or whatever on there, there's some personalization. So that's kind of neat. There's not a big weight difference at all. Maybe just a smidge above the polymer plastic one that it comes with. This fancy deal here that so many people ask me about, this cheek weld / pocket, which I love. I keep like matches and shit in here because it just happens, right? You get away from the truck, you're following a track or whatever, or you see an elk and you run off the road and you shoot that elk and then you track them for 4 hours and then all of a sudden you're in the dark and you have none of your shit because you're an idiot. It's nice to have a little safety pack here. So I got my matches in here. I've got anything that I might find handy, like earplugs. I've got some ballistics charts in here that are laminated. I've got a couple extra bullets in here. I've got some Allen wrenches. stuff like that. So it's nice to have that little pouch. I have found that these right here, these little ammo holders on the outside, that is a great way to lose $30 worth of ammo almost every time, pretty consistently, particularly if this is going into a scabbard. You lay it in the back of the truck, those just get pushed out, right? So handy if you're really cognizant of it. If you're not paying attention, you're going to lose ammo out of those. Now, again, we have this issue of this isn't a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 rifle, so the fit is not quite right for me. This has helped me a lot. You can actually see that there's a little bit of mass right here, and it actually has helped me get my face up a little bit where I want it on the rifle. I'm actually really looking forward to shooting the cross rifle. I've shot it some from SIG, but it's got an adjustable stock, you know, up and out, which is, you know, a little bit black rifle-y, but at the same time, it'd be pretty badass to, you know, to shoot a reasonably priced rifle and have it fit perfectly. But kind of an aside. This has helped me. This rifle fits me pretty well. Having this, I don't need to use that shoe glue because I can catch it just about perfectly. That's going to be, you know, personal preference. But that right there, it's like 30, 40 bucks for this thing. I'll stick a link down below to this one. What else do we got here, guys, in terms of modifications, changes? All right, so this one is going to be relevant on the cost front and the pain in the ass front. You have got to get these barrels threaded. So I obviously send this into a gunsmith, not something you can do at home unless you're a very special individual. And you're looking at, you know, 300 bucks, roughly 300 to 400 bucks, and a bit of a pain in the ass, right? Because you're talking about sending the rifle in, dealing with whatever, you know, shipping bullshit that you've got to deal with, not having the rifle for a while. You've got to deal with the whole taxidermy, gunsmith, hunting guide dynamic, meaning that we're all a bunch of degenerates, and, you know, we might tell you it's going to be a month, but you might not see your rifle for 6 years, those sort of things. So those are all issues with having to get your barrel threaded. You may not have to deal with any of those. You might be in Austin, Texas, or Dallas, where there's 1,000 competent gunsmiths, but you may not, and that might be relevant. So you got an additional 300 bucks. This is the muzzle brake that came when mine was threaded. So it's a pretty slick little muzzle brake, and it actually works pretty darn well. Takes a lot of the recoil out of the gun. I have found that shooting this titanium suppressor from Gunwerks versus this muzzle brake, and honestly, they're like almost the exact same weight. I know that's hard to believe, but I have found that the recoil is basically the same. So in this case, this does about the same recoil mitigation as a suppressor. Obviously, this is loud as fuck, and this suppressor is not, right? Yeah, I can shoot it without ear protection. Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud, but I don't feel like that's an issue. Now, these are not timed. This one, right? So if it's an untimed, there's basically just a bunch of holes on here, you know, all around. So just tighten that puppy up. Don't need a, what do you call it? Crush washer or anything related to that to do it. So guys, I think I have covered that, other than a very controversial one. Oh, you know, I'm not going to talk about slings at the end. You guys don't have time for that shit. I'll make another video. So I'll briefly say that this is one of my favorite mountain slings, right? If I'm backpacking, I love this thing. And it's got all the parts here, right here. That's why it looks goofy. This goes actually to my backpack strap. This is a convenient way to, in a classical sense, use your rifle slinged, or carry your rifle slinged while you're in the backpacks with it, while you're in the mountains with a heavy backpack. This FHF sling works pretty darn well. Probably my favorite. My second favorite for that situation is just to have a clip on my backpack strap where I can always take the, let's say I got the rifle, you know, over my shoulder here. I've got a heavy backpack on. I can take that sling and I can pop it over that clip on my strap. I don't have my backpack here, but you can visualize it. It's not freaking brain surgery. On the shoulder strap right here, there's a little clip the points into my sternum. I take the classic sling, right? This one's not a classic because it has all this cool stuff where you can click it in to your backpack strap. But imagine this is a classic one, and I go over that hook and pop it in. What that stops is that stops the sling constantly trying to come off of your arm because of that backpack and all the bulk and the weight right here, okay? So that's just that. This sling right here is different because it actually clicks in to your backpack strap, and it does the same thing, but it's cleaner and you get kind of less center pull. So this FHF sling does a little bit better on that front. Now, the controversial one, oh, right here, guys, right here. I was telling you about a high quality level. So this is a high quality level with the cosine indicator. You see that? Cosine indicator tells me the cosine of the angle. It's like a round angle or a round, oh, you guys can't see it. Yeah, it's a round level there. So it can tell me actually the angle at which I am pointing the rifle, which is nice to figure out true ballistic, range that you're shooting, distance that you're shooting. And it's got a high quality level on it, right? So I know my cant. That is from my buddy Ward Bryant at Sniper Tools, and that is the cosine indicator with the level. Now, let's talk about the optic. This is a Night Force NXS 56 millimeter objective scope. I believe that is the case. Yes, I'm almost sure this is a 56 millimeter. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that scope right there is a $1,700 to $2,000 scope, and it's a heavy scope. That is why this setup is 10 pounds. If you put a smaller scope on there, like the Leupold that I showed you on the Ruger, you're looking at saving $1,000 off what I'm going to give you is the total price of this gun. And you're looking at saving a pound. So you're back down at 9 pounds, basically, right? Maybe a hair under that. So you're going to be a few ounces, a few tenths of a pound above what the Ruger is. Now, why do I have this on here? This is the controversial part. And I've got just high-end Tally rings on here too. But, and again, good rings. Good rings matter. I'll give you that spiel right now. Any of the guns I show you, if they fall off a pack, they fall out of scabbard, I see them literally tumble down the mountain. I'm going to pick up those rifles, and assuming they still operate and the barrel's clean and there's not, safety issues there, the Zero is still going to be good. I don't view that as much as an optic thing. All optics now are pretty damn good on that front. It's not the old optics of the 80s and 90s where they fall, crash, and you pick them up and you hear things shaking around in them. Most decent optics companies, Vortex, Leupold, Night Force, all the high-end shit, you're not going to have to worry about that. But your rings matter. If you put cheap rings on a $5,000 scope, you're going to have problems. So get good rings. That's my shebang there. Your rings should be north of $100, $150, $200. Yes, painful, just hardware, but it is what it is, okay? And they need to be torqued correctly. I've got a video, I'll stick it up right here for you. Go check it out. In that video, it's a rifle buildup, but I show you how to properly put a scope on. You need to know how to do that. The guys at Cabela's, guys at most gun shops, they don't do it right. You need to learn how to do it yourself, and you also need to learn how to do it yourself in case you got a massive fuck up at home where you need to do it, or you are helping somebody else who their torque's all screwed up and they've got, big gaps in the ring on one side and small gaps on the other side and the stuff's all screwed up. You need to know how to fix that stuff at home and need to know how to do it properly. I go through the whole system in that video, okay? So go check it out. It's not the whole video, but part of the video. It's nitty gritty into how to put a scope on properly. You need to know how to do that as a rifle hunter. God, I keep getting off on different topics. But we got a $2,000 scope on here, a big one, a big objective. Obvious advantages, right? Low light performance of this thing. I can crank this down to 4 power or whatever the low power is. I think that's, 4.5. Crank that puppy down, and that thing's damn near like night vision, right? If I've got any light, I'm going to be able to see really well and make out targets right in those last few minutes of shooting with that big objective. Awesome. Very easy to use, like solid clicking elevation turret. This scope I did have to send back to Night Force because it had an issue with the zero stop. I'm just being transparent. They fixed it for me. Service was good, no complaints. Everything is sturdy, solid, good to go, right? Never had any issues. One of the negatives that people are going to point out is that it's bulky. True. In a scabbard, this thing sucks because it has big turrets on it, right? Big pain in the ass. The other thing is it's just big, so you got to have a big scabbard. So, agreed. The other con that people are going to say is the weight. Disagreed. The additional weight on it, because of this, makes this rifle easier to shoot, less recoil, and I like it better with the heavier scope. I understand that a lot of people are going to be disgusted by that opinion and think that there's no reason that you should be adding weight in the optic for recoil mitigation. And a lot of people will argue because it really makes the balance of the rifle funky. My comeback to that is I haven't noticed that at all. A matter of fact, I like the weight right here, right? I don't really like the weight on the end of the barrel. When I'm going through the bushes, I'm hiking around the mountains, the heavy weight on the end of a barrel from a heavy suppressor sucks balls. I'd much prefer it right here. So we're going to agree to disagree on that. I think it's fine to mitigate some weight through a heavier optic. I know that some of you guys are so pissed right now, but just a fact. So you've got the gun for $750, $900. You've got to spend $300 to have the threading put in. You've got some of these other modifications put in. You've got the expensive optic on here, all of that good stuff. You're looking at $3,250 for this rifle. 46 inches with a break on it, 50 inches with a 7-inch suppressor on it. Maybe that's a 6-inch suppressor on it, but that's the range you're looking at. 50 inches is a bitch of a gun to carry if you're mountain hunting, particularly backpack hunting. Just so you know, I would say that's the con of this rifle, right, is the overall length. Now, you can solve that by putting a smaller barrel on it, you know, doing some modification that way. Different caliber with a shorter barrel, whatever. Just a thought process. That's the length. Total weight here is right at 10 pounds. You can shed a pound if you use a lighter optic. You can shed $1,000 if you use less of an optic. Somewhere around double the cost of the Ruger American. Now, I bitched about it on the Ruger. I love it on the Tikka. The best stock action. The best stock action of any of the inexpensive rifles, or like mid-tier rifles, or even better rifles, like, or more expensive rifles. Some of the custom rifles that are going to cost you $4,000 or $5,000, I do prefer the badass action that I'm going to show you on this Gunwerks rifle. I prefer it, but not by a drastic amount. This is a smooth action. It's beautiful, right? Way better than the Ruger American, not even in the same class. Freaking love it. One thing I will tell you, while I've got you on this hour video, is Tikka bolts do not get oil near these things. Of all the rifles that I've dealt with, these bolts and the firing pin inside of them have the biggest issue in cold weather if you allow oil to get in there at all. I've even heard that some of the newer rifles, even the stock grease that's in there that has been put in there during the manufacturing process, can cause this if you're hunting like late season cow elk and you're in and out of a vehicle, right? So gun is warm, gun is freezing cold and negative 20 degrees when you get out, that sort of thing. You can run into problems with any oil in there becoming more viscous and then gumming up and then getting light strikes on rounds. I've had it happen a bunch of times. I just cycle through and kill cows because that's what I do. But it can throw you off big time and it obviously sucks. So what you want to do is be very careful how much oil you use on this gun. I basically don't use any, and when I do, I use dry lube anywhere near the bolt so I don't have that problem. Highly recommend you do the same just in case you end up in that situation. The problem with it, and the reason it's super annoying, is you're never gonna have a problem until you get into certain environmental conditions, and then all of a sudden, this gun's not gonna work. So that is the last thing I'll say about it. This gun has killed way over 50 elk, probably over 80 elk, okay? So proven, does its job, kick-ass gun for a couple $1,000, $3,000. Let's dive into the $10,000 gun. All right, you sheep hunters out there, we are not in Kansas anymore. This is a different deal. So this is the Gunwerks Magnus with a Revic optic on here. All right, so I have shot this gun quite a bit myself, and then I've been using it as kind of my guide loner gun for quite a few elk hunts. And what I would say is this thing's an elk killing machine. Right off the bat, this is a different deal, guys. This is how the gun came to me from Gunwerks. If I was in charge of marketing at Gunwerks, this would be my thought process. I would tell guys, look, you can get a Tikka, do all those different things with the Tikka, right? You can get whatever rifle out there, do all of the things, work on each little part of it, adjust this, that, whatever to how you want it, and you're going to end up with a rifle that works for hunting elk, or works for hunting deer, is a great mountain hunting rifle. Or you can just buy a Gunwerks gun, drop the big money, and it's simply going to work. And so you've already got a bunch of recoil mitigation, all right? You've got the brake out of the factory. They'll put it on there for you, all good. Length of pull here is actually adjustable, right? You can adjust, it has a ability to adjust it right here, you know, in the pad. You can add spacers in here. They have, you can do that, and you can get it to fit you just perfectly. That's all good. The action on it is freaking smooth as butter, better than the Tikka. So this pick rail here is built in on this Magnus, and it has a quick disconnect, a QD sling swivel. I much prefer that. Another little thing here that is nice is the sling attachments are on the side of the stock instead of like the classic hunting deal at the bottom. Better for over a backpack, better for carrying in the mountains, without a doubt. The rifle has a much higher quality barrel, so a lot of the things I talked about with the Tikka, you're not gonna have the same issue with this carbon fiber barrel. You're looking at 44 inches with the brake. You're looking at somewhere around 48 inches with the suppressor on here. This rifle is in 7 PRC, great caliber. Negative of this caliber is it's expensive, right? You're looking at $4 to $5 a round if you're reloading your own ammo. If you're buying it, you're probably looking more at like $6 or $7 a round. So not cheap to shoot, but nothing about this is really cheap. The total cost of this rifle is gonna be around $10,000, $10,200, something in there, depending on some of the options that you choose. You're looking at 9.5 pounds with the optic, 9.4 pounds. The Revic optic on here, it has got, so this is something that like 2 years ago I would have been hesitant about. Like I was either, you know, gonna do mills, or I was gonna do MOA, I was gonna do my own math, all of that, right? But since using this rifle, I've kind of changed that, because you've got the Revic optic on here, which is like Gunwerks' sister company, right? And what they do is they put a turret on here that is just dial to range, right? So 350 yards, I just dial to 3.5, 350 yards, pull the trigger. That's not a new thing. There's other people that do turrets like that. It's not a new thing, but it's all right here, and then they have it etched in here. What muzzle velocity, you know, the environmental variables that it was zeroed at. So you know that here from a practical standpoint. But if you combine this with the rangefinder that I have, which is not cheap either, I think you're looking at $3,000, the Revic rangefinder, which I would say, you know, not to get a, you know, go off on, but I've been using it quite a bit for years. I use the EL range. I find them very comparable, weight-wise, the ergonomics. A lot of times I forget that I'm using one versus the other. So similar optic. But anyways, the nice thing about it is I can tie that rangefinder to this particular rifle, and then I'm getting a shoot to yardage off the rangefinder, right? And that shoot to yardage is adjusting for what this cap is at in terms of environmental variables. So if this was zeroed in and this cap is based on 1,000 feet of elevation, and I'm shooting a mountain goat at 13,000 feet of elevation, my shoot to range on my binocular is going to correlate exactly with what I want to dial here. There's no math involved. So that's huge. So all of this sound like I'm giving you a sales pitch. Is it worth it to you? The average guy getting into Western hunting, the average guy out there where, $10,000 is a shit pile of money, this isn't worth it. But if you're a guy who is getting into elk hunting, getting into deer hunting, getting into sheep hunting, getting into goat hunting, and you are pumped about it and you're spending a lot of your time, like you have a limited amount of time, and you're spending a lot of your time getting up to speed on that, right? And you don't want to have another hobby of fiddling around with rifles, right? Which it is a hobby if you want to be good at it, you want to perfect it, you want to know what's going on. If you don't want that hobby right now, maybe you want it way in the future. You just want a rifle that's capable of shooting elk at far distances. And let me just cover that. So tagline of Gunwerks is 1,000 yards out of the box. True, but not true. Capabilities of the rifle, absolutely. You could kill stuff at 1,000 yards with this out of the box. The one factor that you got to pay attention to, two factors you got to pay attention to. You got to look at what I talked about earlier in terms of the caliber choice, the bullet you're shooting, the round you're shooting. Is that bullet performing at the muzzle velocities that you're shooting in terms of distances? So if you're shooting 900 to 1,000 yards, is there enough velocity there for that bullet to perform? That's the first question. The second question, and that's regardless of your skill set. That's just a fact, right? You got to figure that out, how far you can shoot. The second question you got to answer is wind. How well can you call the wind? I'll stick a video up right here. Basically covers the topic that the vast majority of guys in the mountains are way worse at calling the wind than they think they are. In general, until you're a pro at that, until a guide that's with you, a spotter that's with you is a pro at that, like a master at it, a lot of elk hunting situations, you're still not going to want to shoot this rifle over 500-600 yards just because of the variability in the wind. So you have that component of it, and then you have the component of, getting your rest right, your shooting form, controlling that flinch, reaction to the explosion of the round going off, all of that. You have that component. That's going to factor in too. No wind or can call wind phenomenally. Terminal performing bullet at far distances, and a guy that can shoot his ass off. Absolutely. This piece of gear is capable of it. Now, if you go this route, don't save $1,000 on the optic, okay? Because you want the system, right? You want the Revic system with the Gunwerks thing, because that plays into why you're buying this, all right? Again, simplicity. Don't make a hobby out of ballistics and setting up a rifle and all that shit, right? That's where the value is. This thing just works. If you don't, and that's like the crux of it, guys. If that's not valuable to you, like you want that additional hobby, you want to fiddle around with your rifle, then again, there's no value in going from the $3,500 rifle I showed you to this rifle. The real value is this thing, just everything smoothly integrated, and you don't have to make it a hobby. The shit just works for you, okay? And in that case, you want to have the Revic system. That just is what it is. I feel like I'm a freaking salesman for the system, but that's the real value. Don't buy a Gunwerks gun and then piece a bunch of other shit into it. If anything, buy a Revic optic system, with the binos and this scope, and then put it on a cheaper rifle. You could put this Revic system, the whole system I described, the shoot to, dial in, the range finding on the binoculars, all of that. You could take all that, which is an expensive system in its own right. You're looking at like $5,000, right? But you could take that and you could put it on a $2,000 rifle setup, right? And it would work phenomenally. So do that if you want to save some money. Don't buy a Gunwerks gun, in my view, and then put in an optics and range finding system that saves you money. That doesn't make any sense to me. This is all about the freaking package, okay? So do the whole package if you're gonna go this route, because that's what you're paying for. Carbon barrel, titanium action, brake, 8,000 bucks for the rifle. The optic, this Revic optic, is gonna cost you $2,000, $2,200. That brings you to $10,000 and change, right? $10,000, 500 bucks. The one thing the math is missing there is these rings. These are $300 rings with the pick rails here, right? So you've got damn good rings on here. And just to pound in that use case on this rifle, guys, and I don't make a dime if you buy a Gunwerks rifle, just so you guys know. I don't make a dime. But I will tell you that I have guided in the last 6 months several hunters that are hunting their very first elk in a mountain environment. Phenomenal hunts, but still hunts that you gotta trek around, you gotta cover country, you're gonna be shooting at bulls from 250 to 500 yards. I've taken those individuals, we've shot this rifle once for half a day, gone over the system, shot 5 to a dozen rounds out of the rifle so they got their comfort level. The rifle really does mitigate the recoil pretty well, particularly given the caliber is not a small caliber. All of this next day or over the next several days have got them a shot opportunity at bulls from 300 to 450 yards, one shot kills, okay? I'm not saying that's gonna happen every time, but highly capable out of the box for that kind of stuff. All right, guys, covered the spectrum for you. $1,500 gun all the way up to a $10,000 gun. What's important, what you should think about. Thanks, guys. I'll catch you later.